fit. Yeah, Nathan, if you can go to the next slide, please. So, as you probably already know, climate change is going on, and we can expect some major risks for our region. We've got extreme weather events. We've got flooding, where you actually are in nationally recognized flash flood alley, drought, which we're struggling with, wildfires, which we don't necessarily hear a lot about, but is a real thing for us in this area, and excessive heat. So those are the challenges we're trying to think about. Nathan, next slide, please. So what do we mean by climate change resilience? When I first got involved with climate change issues, actually decades ago now, we talked a lot about climate mitigation, trying to actually stop climate change by stopping CO2 from going into the air. And there's other greenhouse gases besides CO2, but that's a big one. Or take it out of the air, like planting trees, for example, to take out CO2 from the air. And then we start thinking about climate adaptation, or at least that's the sequence I was in, where you realize that, hey, we can take CO2 out of the air or keep from putting in it, but there's so much CO2 already in the air that climate change is going to continue. Even if we stopped all greenhouse gas emissions today around the world, climate change would still continue for a while. And so we need to learn to adapt to the kinds of things I was talking about in the first slide, flooding, for example, by improving our drainage system so that we can anticipate more flooding and address that. And now we're to the point of talking about resilience, which is not only to do those things, but also to realize that we may not be able to protect ourselves from all these things. And we need to be able to restore ourselves and build back better, even in face of uncertain climate future. I don't know about you guys, but I'm starting to appreciate the poor weathermen have a hard time forecasting when it's going to rain because our climate is changing. The weather is so unpredictable these days, and there's going to be things happening into the future that we haven't seen before. And we need to think more holistically about our natural systems and our social systems to try to protect ourselves and to be able to restore normal operations afterward. Nathan, please. So one of the things we saw was that FEMA put out a report on building resilience with nature-based solutions. And I was looking in there, and lots of stuff related to recreation, stormwater parks. And we have some of these in San Antonio, the parks that are built in floodplains. They're designed to flood and to store water and to help treat the water before it gets into the ground or ends up in a creek or something. And these things enhance recharge and water quality. They also talk specifically about greenways, corridors of protected open space for conservation and for recreation. And we'll see later, it also relates to wildfires. And it links wildlife habitats. And obviously, recreational trails are a form of greenways and can be used to stabilize the banks of streams and rivers. And another thing they talk about is land conservation, which it reduces impervious cover, which is important for a lot of reasons, including heat, helping to cool us. And it also, like what Great Springs is doing, our intent is to improve water quality and quantity with land conservation, but it also provides open space and provides a healthy human environment and improves biodiversity by doing that. So I think I hand it over to Ben now. He's going to pick up from here. Nathan, if you'll go to the next slide. Thank you.
Yeah, one of the things Bill and I were talking about actually just before this meeting was, that he's very biased against solutions that only serve one purpose. So we often talk about stacked solutions. So where one thing you do one thing so that you get multiple benefits rather than trying to isolate a need and then only try to address that need. So he gave a great example. I mean, if you could say, for example, if you buffer a stream with a trail, you're not only improving water quality, you're conserving habitat, you're creating recreation space. And then a similar way, that's what we're talking about for green belts when it comes to wildfire resilience. Now, initially you think green belts, well, isn't that like where wildfires happen, right? Out in the natural environment. But we're talking about areas that would be controlled for their fuel content to help mitigate how much fire could carry through them. And also that in the case like you see in this picture, I mean, you can also use them where you put in prescribed fire, which is part of mitigating that fuel content, to basically manage the land well, but also keep those fuels down. And so we're looking at conservation of open space as long as it's managed to be wildfire oriented, being part of the equation that not only provides habitat, provides the quality of life experiences that of course we all enjoy, that provide those ecosystem services that a healthy watershed can provide, of slowing water down, filtering it, sinking it in, that kind of stuff, but at the same time also adds some fire resilience. Now, Bill, when he came out to Bernie and he said, I really want to talk to you about our mutual interest in trails, but he quickly jumped to trails as a fire break. And that's where we started thinking, well, wait a minute, this sounds like an idea that could fit into this Camp Bullis Sentinel landscape sort of mission, if you will, to create a more resilient landscape around Camp Bullis. And so that's really kind of where this whole thing started. But we've started to expand this concept to realize that really what we're talking about is a regional strategic plan, if you will, that's built around all of the values of resilience. So even though I'm saying role of green belts here and wildfire resilience, it's actually just one of the many ways that we want to approach the tools in our toolkit, that we're stacking multiple benefits in addition to this wildfire resilience. Um, so I'm just trying to read through the list, make sure I'm not missing any key points. Yeah. Let's go to the next slide, Nathan. Okay, so again, mentioned this earlier. When you throw a trail in right there next to a stream, you actually potentially buffer that space. You maintain more wild habitat. You have greater flood control because you're not encroaching on the riparian zone on that stream side that slopes down to the water. And as you can see in this explanation, it creates water quality benefits and of course stabilizes our banks. So many, when I go like down the Guadalupe, for example, when I'm paddling, it's not uncommon for me to come across some place where somebody decided to mow right down to the stream. And basically what they're asking for is for that whole stream bank to wash away. And what we're talking about doing is stacking all these values and also at the same time protecting that stream so that it can continue to attenuate floods. That whole riparian zone is a big sponge. So we want it to be basically absorbing water during storm events and then slowly letting go of that water when there's when it's, well, frankly, when we're in drought. That maintains base flow, etc. But we're trying to use recreation in this case as the context for the public to want to invest in that buffer, because we're trying to stack values. If we just go in and say, hey, we just got to protect the creeks, for a lot of people that's missed on them. But if we go and say, hey, why don't we put in this trail system, now the humans get to enjoy basically a linear park. On one side, they have easy access to their neighborhoods. On the other, and also we're protecting the stream. Now you've got more values to sell, and that's basically what we're after in this project, I guess I'll call it. Hey, Nathan, next one, please, man. Okay, so we are not making this up as we go along. This is a map from the Mariposa County Recreation and Resiliency Plan. Out there, they've got. Help me out. What's the name of the national park there? Bill, do you remember? Is it
Oh,
Yosemite?
yes,
Or is
yes,
it?
yes,
Yeah, I think it's
California.
yeah. So obviously, we all know that California sometimes have some major wildfire impacts, and they've realized our national park out there, Yosemite, is at risk of getting nailed by one of these wildfires. And of course, you could say, well, it's part of the natural process, but I don't know. Natural processes are pretty messed up. by humans. I mean, there used to be huge old growth forests all over North America, and now they're all sort of, mid to late successional forests, but they're not the huge forests that used to exist. But nonetheless, so if we're going to have wildfire, let's accept that we're going to have it in the first place, and secondly, let's do what we can to mitigate how intense those can be and how much destruction that they can do. Give some of these older growth forests a chance to really truly get to true old growth, to become the giants of the land that they used to be. So what you see here, and this is really kind of hard to interpret, it's really meant to just kind of give us a visual sense, is they're basically saying, hey, look, we've got these trails out there, and if we convert them into fire breaks, then we're getting both the natural benefits and at the same time the fire benefits. And they're also in their plan proposing additional trails that go through key areas where a fire crew can easily run out a trail and extinguish a fire. But Bill also he went to a workshop recently, and we talked about this a few weeks ago, or a month ago. But he was talking about they're specifying a certain trail width where you want to really manage that vegetation. It doesn't mean you eliminate it. You can still have shade vegetation, but you're really controlling the fuel. So it becomes a huge fuel break. It's access for the firefighting, and it's a fuel break. The other idea that we were playing with is that these trails ideally would run, not always on contour, but generally on contour, which means they can be part of flood mitigation, slowing water down, sinking it in, which also then benefits aquifer recharge. So all of this is to say that basically, look, we are not recreating the wheel. We're adapting it to these solutions to our context. And also, by the way, this recreation and resiliency plan, this won a national award. So, this is out there, and basically it's time for us as a region to get real about wildfire and to prepare for it. While we're talking about wildfire, Bill wanted me to address this. I was on the county wildfire protection plan for Kendall County, and I couldn't make the first handful of meetings because I had this transportation plan where I was working actually with Nolan and Pam and doing some stuff, but I was always hobbled by these other committee meetings, and finally I got to show up there, and I was concerned. I thought, oh no, is this going to be one of those sort of rote, plans? And I quickly realized that our fire chiefs were comparing our region of Texas, Kendall County, to Paradise, California. And as we know, Paradise became hell, right? It had a major wildfire disturbance, basically burned down a huge, huge chunk of that community that it tore through. And they said, look, our geology, our plant community, our susceptibility to drought, and also the tendency for high wind events makes us a potential candidate for a fire just like that. And here's why that heartened me. Number one, they were referring to California, and usually you can't do that because everybody gets offended. How dare you say California? But I realized they were exhibiting a maturity, that we are similar to California in that sense, and that's a good benchmark to work off of. And I thought that exhibited a certain maturity about where their discussion was going. That the bottom line is, we have fires, we got to deal with them. Who cares about where the examples come from? And then secondly, they started working, and honestly, if you look at our wildfire protection plan, it's amazing. It was done by a woman, Christy Wiley. Anyway, and it's an incredible document. But basically, they went to every single community to try to figure out where could there be fire protections. But what they didn't do is what Bill and I are trying to get toward, is think about how we can create natural infrastructure context where we can fight wildfire. They were treating it more as triage. Oh God, the fire's headed to a community. What are we going to do? Versus trying to get out ahead and maybe put in a trail, which acts as a fire break, which also acts as a fuel break, et cetera, where they can get out and fight that fire. And so we're trying to basically say, here, let's overlay it. And this is not really a plan, it's more a vision at this point, but we overlay this concept and encourage the counties and the local governments and the fire teams, et cetera, to adopt this vision of these stacked benefits that help build resilience. In this case, I'm talking about wildfire. So I talked a lot on that slide. Next slide. And so when we were speaking, we quickly, this idea just spun up really fast. We were having, pancakes. I was eating pancakes. And we were just having coffee. Pam was with us as well. Pam Hodges, who's on the call. And we just suddenly started taking this concept from, what if we created a trail that goes from Kendall County over to, say, the Great Springs Project, and et cetera, to, wait a minute, this whole region needs a strategic plan for resilience. And so, obviously we're emphasizing nature-based solutions. Um, it says the second bullet point's a really key part. Work at geographic scales from individual site to watershed. The point there is that we can't be thinking about counties. We can't say that, hey, there's a county line, so therefore it's like the issue stops at the county. We need to be thinking about planning across counties. And so we're talking about providing some context, a vision, an idea about solutions that can help those counties start to have those conversations and can help regional advocates promote these ideas to the counties as well. Um, as Bill was saying, it says increased benefit cost ratio of single purpose projects. We want to stack benefits in every single project. So recreation really, it could be just an outcome of an otherwise more resilience focused effort. Conversely, a resilient outcome can come from a recreation effort. They're all stacked together. Let's go ahead and embrace it as such and find as many excuses to implement these smarter solutions by justifying it, whether through recreation or resilience or other values, wildfire protection, et cetera. Expand. So it says expands the number of grants and funding sources. Look, grantors, federal government, state government, they want to see what you're doing and how it fits into a broader whole. They're starting to understand that you need to stack all these values, but also that you shouldn't be just having these sort of one-off projects. Like you can't, putting in a trail that's just a straight line or even just a loop, it doesn't really take you anywhere, is a lot less sexy to the grantors than, say, having something that's a holistic framework that you're trying to work toward. And yeah, recreation is very popular with voters. Actually, conservation bonds are very popular with voters. We just passed one at 67% of the vote for Kendall County, and that bond has been worth $20 million. And we're using it for conservation easements. We're going to be using it for parks. And I can see us going for future bonds that are also talking about linear parks, which is also known as a trail. Yeah, and then increasing examples and guidance. We see this as this vision being both maps and a document that promotes resilient solutions and ideally promotes it in the context of military readiness as a way to say, guys, look, if the military is taking this seriously and these are the solutions that they lean toward for their own projects, then we need to also be considering these smarter solutions as well. And really, frankly, the Campbell Sentinel Landscape Program is contextualized around readiness, as they call it, meaning being ready for something happening, and resilience, the ability to spring back from that happening. And so we're saying, all right, next leveling this means we want to get the communities involved in that vision and that effort. Next slide. And I guess I'm done. Thank you. And Bill, I feel like I always miss something. So what did I miss? What do you want to say?
I don't think you missed anything. The whole idea is to use, as you pointed out, use recreation as a framework to be considering this resiliency idea. And as you know, there's a big push on using nature-based solutions because they tend to be less costly. They tend to last a lot longer. In fact, they get better. You put in a concrete drainage ditch and it starts deteriorating the day you finish it, building it. Whereas if you use a more natural approach, it just gets better and better and better as the biodiversity kicks in, and you see how you strengthen the area that you're interested in that way. Um, as you point out, two organizations are already interested in these ideas and working in these ideas uh, in separate geographies right now. But we see where this could make sense at a regional scale that involves multiple counties. As you pointed out, watersheds don't end at the county line, and we need to think regionally. We need to think about resiliency. We need to think about natural solutions, and we think recreation is a way to tie all this together.
And we need to educate the public, and we also think recreation makes a more attractive hook for some of the public than just simply saying resilience planning.
So those are contact information. If you want to reach out to us, we'd be happy to talk further or provide more information, etc. And Annalisa, I really appreciate you giving us an audience here to share this concept.
Well, thank you so much. And we're recording this. I guess Nathan, you can stop the recording now. But really appreciate y'all making this presentation